Welcome to Supercharging Security with Generative AI for Healthcare. I'm one of your presenters, Bill Reed. I'm a security advisor here in Google's Office of the CISO at Google Cloud. And joining me is my colleague, Raj Tuliani. Raj.
Hi, my name is Raj Tuliani. I'm a customer engineer with Healthcare Life Sciences at Google Cloud.
Today's agenda is really going to focus on three categories, three areas of coverage. First, we're going to take a look at some of the broad security trends in the healthcare industry and really talk about what we see at Google through the threat intelligence and the incident response work of Mandiant, a division of Google Cloud. The second thing we're going to do is talk about how Google, and specifically Google Cloud, approaches security on our services and our work with customers. Third, we're going to cover some new announcements regarding the use of generative AI and large language models to help make the security job of our customers a little less toilsome, address the threat landscape, and enhance the talent of their teams. So let's get started. Let's take a look at the threat landscape. What I'm sharing with you is information that comes out of Mandiant's 2023 M-Trends report. This was released in the first quarter of this year. And what you'll note here is that the security industry is one of the more targeted in among all of the global industries. And what we found is that this is a fairly consistent trend year over year. Healthcare has generally been a target in roughly this kind of space over the last several years. And it's a target that attackers have particularly approached with one type of threat, and that is of ransomware, or their use of malicious cryptography to encrypt data and prevent its use and access. And generally, the motivation of the attacks that we see in the healthcare space are for financial gain and some disruption. Now, the thing about these attackers is that they really are impacting broadly across all of the subsectors of the healthcare industry. All of these different parts of the healthcare delivery system are impacted. What you see here is that it tends to be proportional to the general IT surface area of these subsegments, meaning there's a lot of computers and a lot of technology deployed in things like hospitals, in clinics and that sort of thing. Simply because there's more of them, there tend to be more attacks. We see the top categories of healthcare facilities, providers and their suppliers taking the brunt of most of these. So where are these attacks coming from? Well, the red areas on this chart are indicating the location of the origin of these attackers. And the blue areas represent the target countries or the targets for these attackers. And again, remember, many of these are attacks that are really targeted around financial opportunity, looking at taking advantage of the rich data that we deal with inside healthcare and its value in the public market. Now let's turn to how we approach security here at Google Cloud. Our approach here at Google Cloud aligns with what we call security megatrends. These are large trends that are made possible by the fact that we have cloud computing as a main modality for the way that work is done today. I'm just going to focus on a couple categories just to call them out. One is that we see a large trend toward the use of software-defined infrastructure. So typically, the old approach was that I would buy a server, a piece of hardware. It would come, I would deploy it into a rack, I would implement operating systems, and then I would load it up with various drivers and other applications to build out a technology. And I would do that using a person going through a series of execution steps. What happens today is really defining these architectures through a series of scripts or Terraform or other types of programs. And these are deployed really as software packages to deploy all of the various services. What it allows us to do is to build out environments very consistently. And so we can define what it is that we want and be very declarative in that, make sure that we have the right controls, and then deploy that as though it were just a software package that we were deploying. but it's building out an entire computing infrastructure. I'm going to talk also about simplicity. And really what we're seeing and driving toward is trying to simplify. Now, one of the challenges and banes of existence for CISOs, and certainly was one of mine, was complexity. Security is very difficult in highly complex environments. And what we're finding is that we're seeing more and more drive toward trying to simplify. Is there ways in which we can better identify resources, create and deploy new technologies, and do that in a way that makes the job much more simple? Can we make it easier, for example, to find the signal that represents true threat from the noise that represents distraction? Now, security has here kind of three kind of pillars that we take as we think about building our products and solutions. The first is security by design. And security really needs to begin early, right from the moment that technologies are designed. We have to do things like threat modeling. We have to look at the regulatory landscape and think about many of the controls that our customers are going to need in the industries in which they operate. And we have to build that in so that we can design security right from the beginning. It's much more efficient to do it early. The second is that we want to make sure that our technologies are secure by default. It's why we did things like make the cloud storage environments encrypted by default. Now, sure, you can add more protections, you can add additional key management, but we wanted to make sure that right out of the gate, that data would be protected. We want to make sure that the default posture is secure. Finally, security and deployment really relates to ensuring that our technologies, as they're deployed, are thought about in the larger architectural context. So if I buy a particular product, I'm not going to deploy it in its kind of solo existence. It's going to be part of a larger architecture, interconnected with other sets of services. And so one of the things that we do is build blueprints and design patterns that help our customers and their partners deploy these technologies with the best practices that we've tested and what we've seen other customers use in their industries. Let's take a closer look at some of the investments we've made in security-specific services. Now, I'm going to use the National Institute for Standards and Technology, otherwise known as NIST, their cybersecurity framework as a way to kind of organize our review of these technologies. This framework might be similar to or familiar to many security professionals, as it was really built in collaboration between the government and private industry to improve the security of critical infrastructure. And it takes kind of a security lifecycle based approach. Now, first, under the identify pillar, we have services like cloud asset inventory. Now, as a security professional, you really have to know what assets you are trying to protect. And one of the challenges is keeping track of all of those. And so cloud asset inventory is a service that helps you identify all of the different services that you've had deployed into your environment and understand that asset base that you're trying to secure. Security Command Center is a service, for example, that helps you identify your compliance posture. Where am I with respect to a set of controls that I'm trying to achieve? Under the Protect column, you'll see a number of services. Notably, this is where I call out work we do in the zero trust space, and specifically beyond Corp Enterprise. This work grew out of an experience that we had here at Google and engineering that we did to try to better secure our own endpoints and network. It was really about getting away from network-based authentication and access control to one that was built around a zero trust model or a trust nothing, verify often kind of an approach. And we've made this available to our customers through this particular offering. The Detect features services like cloud DLP or data loss prevention. Now, this is a service that not only helps you identify and catalog sensitive data, but then apply a set of treatments to those data that are appropriate for the use. For example, if I'm going to build a data set that involves PHI, but nobody needs to know the PHI variables, they just need to understand some summary statistics. I could treat that data in a way that allows for the PHI to be redacted according to the requirements of HIPAA. The respond and recover columns really help us think about and approach our customers with both the proactive and the reactive work that's needed to be resilient in the face of attack. Now, at Google Cloud, we purchased Mandiant last year. Mandiant is the world's leading incident response and threat intelligence organization. And we've added their world-class incident response services into our portfolio and incorporated their threat intelligence into our suite of products to help our customers not only respond to the attacks, but gain insight into the threats and proactively plan for the kind of resilience they need with the consulting services and tools that Mandiant brought. And it's really this portfolio that we've approached across our customers' security lifecycle. I want to drill in and take a closer look at one area of security. And security is kind of complex of lots of different types of disciplines, but one in particular is security operations. Now, this is typically the team that's responsible for day-to-day security monitoring, the application of controls, the maintenance of those controls, vulnerability management, and often is at the front lines of any kind of security event, trying to understand if something is real or not. This is where there's a lot of work to do today to manage and maintain the security posture of a company. And it's dealing with a lot of real-time information that has to be gathered and understood, evaluated, and then an action taken. It's generally an organization that deals with a lot of threats. And there is a lot of work to do to deal with that threat landscape that's very dynamic. And as you saw earlier, significantly targeted. And then finally, this is often a team that has, because of that toil, a lot of stressed and sometimes missing talent. Sometimes it's really hard to find the talent you need to fill out your security operations. So this is really difficult work. And we know that we need better tools to help our customers do that critical job. So right now, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Raj, and he's going to talk about some of the work that we're doing and investments in this space.
Thanks, Bill. That was very insightful. As we have described the healthcare threat landscape and how Google has approached security, I'd like to now talk about how AI innovations are helping customers address these security challenges. As you may know, through the years, the generative AI revolution started at Google, and we have continued to innovate through the creation of transformers. At the time, most people did not realize that this new ML architecture, which introduced the concept of attention and self-attention, which among other things let the model tell what the meaning of ambiguous words were, was correct by looking at the context in which they occur, would actually spark an AI revolution by enabling the creation of large language models that could do much more than just language translation. So the innovation milestones at Google evolved to language model for dialogue applications, or Lambda, to Pathways language model commonly known as PaLM, to BAR, which is a consumer-based conversational AI service that you may already heard about. All of these innovations have led to creating domain-specific and industry-specific large language models, or LLMs. A good example is the AI innovation we have brought to security with SecPaLM. SecPaLM is a descendant of the ULM, or Unified Language Model, fine-tuned for security-specific use cases, which we'll also talk about. What you see on the slide now is a summary of all the big challenges that we have faced in the industry today. And one of the most important is the threat landscape that is growing every single day. As we have already heard, with a combination of Mandiant and Google, we have the most incredible, unmatched visibility into the threat landscape. But the threat landscape is constantly changing every single day, and there's more and more information coming our way. Our detection capabilities have to stay ahead of all the bad actors that have evolved over time, so that our customers can stay abreast of all this information by giving them the relevant insights that they need. For example, we know that the healthcare payers, providers have been very sought after targets, with the member data being a gold mine for the dark web for a variety of reasons. For life science organizations, drug discovery IP has been another sought after target that attracts a number of bad actors. Another big challenge is the endless toil that is involved in staying ahead with regards to security. We know it takes a lot of work. in terms of security. You have to secure your resources, detecting threats, understanding risks throughout the security lifecycle. There's a tremendous amount of work being done. And that work is not just by the security folks, it's done by every single person in the IT organization. And a number of people who actually make changes, for example, making changes or creating new applications, that's like a tax for them. Each time they have to make an update or create an application, they have to make sure, what does this mean in terms of security? Do I have to change the security configuration? Am I going to be introducing new vulnerabilities? What am I going to do? So we understand all of this, and we know we have to make it easier for all our customers. Finally, there's a massive talent shortage, as we heard. The amount of open roles for skilled professionals versus the skilled professionals available, there's a large gap. What if there's a better way to do this? What if our customers could protect themselves just like the experts do? What if when we found the first instance of a compromise, we were able to act immediately? In medical parlance, we talk about the first patient being patient zero. What if we could prevent there ever being a patient one when it comes to threats? What if we could build systems that could secure themselves? Every time you updated and launched a new system, it can write its own security configuration. What if we could actually stay ahead of the software supply chain for you, so that somebody who comes in who's not necessarily a security expert could get up to speed quickly? Using natural language, they can actually climb that skill curve very quickly and then make systems as secure as the experts do. So if we can create those AI-assisted user experiences that could enable the products to do things like making recommendations about preventative strategies to identifying threats, explaining the complexities of existing threats, that would free up the experts to focus on the more complex threats. So now let's take a look at some examples of how we have been able to address these challenges. Here are some examples of how our products have addressed these challenges. With Virus Total Insight, you can analyze suspicious files, domains, IPs, and URLs to detect malware and other breaches, automatically sharing them with the security community, thus democratizing malware analysis and flagging unknown threats. It prevents malwares from becoming incidents. With Breach Analytics, you can discover active breaches as they happen, so that as customers, you know what we know when we know it. So thus, you continuously monitor your current and historical security events. You identify and prioritize matches with latest indicators of compromise through advanced analytics. I know you heard a little bit about assured open source software. And with assured open source software, you reduce risk to your software supply chain by using the same OSS packages that Google uses and secures using your own developer workflows. You can actually increase the confidence in the integrity of the packages through signed, tamper-evident provenance, and therefore you reduce risk with Google actively finding and fixing vulnerabilities in those packages on your behalf, thereby reducing the toil in vulnerability detection and reducing the toil in security testing as well. With Mandiant Threat Intel AI platform, that's built on top of Mandiant's massive threat graph, which is leveraging SecPalm to quickly find, summarize, and act on threats relevant to your organization. And that's built on information that Mandiant has collected across the globe, researching bad actors via undercover adversarial pursuits, incident forensics, malicious infrastructure reconstructions, and actor identification processes. With Chronicle AI, we are making investigation and response radically simpler and more powerful in Chronicle. AI is making it easier for Chronicle users to interact with and drill down into security events by using natural language. Simply by creating a query, a natural language query, Chronicle AI behind the scenes generates the query, presents the initial information, and makes it possible to modify and iterate on your results. For the security analysts, AI boosts their speed into initial investigations by providing security insights and trends that pull together, and they analyze the data around those security events, entity insights, and behavior of those anomalies. Refining and analyzing this data becomes a conversational investigative experience that reduces mean time to response, and it also quickly determines the full scope of events. All of this can ultimately help use your resources in a more focused manner. Security Command Centers, or SEC AI, uses always-on machine learning to detect malicious scripts executing in customer container environment and immediately alerts the customer. All of these were newer AI capabilities that we have recently introduced. You already heard about the capabilities we had before, like Cloud Data Loss Prevention, or DLP, which leverages machine learning to find and classify data and also hide or tokenize data. You also have heard about confidential computing, which not only secures your computing while it's being processed, but you could also secure it while you can collaborate on, train, and deploy sensitive and regulated AI models in the cloud, all while preserving confidentiality. With Virus Total Insight, the goal is to prevent threats from turning into incidents by catching the bad actors far sooner. It quickly identifies and describes malicious code. Here, you're seeing a short demonstration of analyzing a PowerShell code to determine if it's malicious or benign, so you can catch malware quicker without having to reverse engineer it. As you know, not having to deal with sandbox execution is huge for security experts. I talked a little bit about Mandiant Threat Intel AI platform. You get the benefit of thousands of hours of research by Mandiant's analysts, automatically summarized and distilled into personalized reports drafted for you that you can share with your board or with the security operations team. Because when it comes to mitigating threats, we know every single second counts. So transforming our time is another superpower of AI. It reduces the repetitive tasks of moving us to a world where systems proactively recommend the next step and ultimately even secure themselves. Take Chronicle AI. It leverages its investigative expertise to automatically generate queries, analyze the results, and enables the analyst to refine them all in line. This eliminates the toil of manually writing those queries, manually sifting through the data. Now, analysts can make those decisions faster and more confidently. These assistive capabilities bridge the growing cyber talent gap by shifting how practitioners do security. We want all IT professionals, even if they are not IT or security experts, to secure their assets faster and better. Security experts should be spending their specialized time tackling the more complex threats. That's a big reason why Chronicle AI transforms the task of writing an effective detection from minutes or hours to seconds. You provide the parameters and Chronicle AI writes the detection for you. You don't have to be an expert in YARA-L. And you can quickly generate a summary and threat guidance for your case. You can understand and resolve cases very quickly in seconds. Similarly, SCC AI, or Security Command Center AI, uses always-on machine learning, translating complex attack paths into easily understandable explanations about risk exposure. This increases trust in terms of understanding what is going on behind the scenes. It also includes the right steps to fix those vulnerabilities before an attacker can exploit your environment. These kinds of insights show AI's ability to analyze vast amounts of data for connections and amplify for critical issues. All of this innovation across all our products is powered by Google Cloud Security AI Workbench, which includes the specialized LLM trained on Google's Virus Total, Mandiant's frontline intelligence, and backed by years of AI research across Google DeepMind and from a variety of other sources. We are now working with early partners to extend our platform by adding their unique intelligence and data connections. Soon, we will be inviting customers to leverage Security AI Workbench by making those private connections to their own data. And we always want to make those connections to the data as private as a customer need it to be, and making sure that the data remains their own data. Because Security AI Workbench is built on Google Cloud's Vertex AI, you get enterprise data protection, sovereignty, and compliance all built in. Join us in trailblazing a new era of security using generative AI so we can prevent threats, eliminate toil, and empower our collective talent to protect our organizations better than ever. Learn more at cloud.google.com/security/AI. Thank you for your interest in Google Cloud. We will now move on to the Q&A portion of this presentation. We're happy to answer any questions you may have for us.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you. We're going to take questions now from the audience. With me here is my colleague Raj Tuliani, and we welcome your questions. One question that we had come in, it was related to kind of what we can learn from other industries in the healthcare space. And I think this is kind of an interesting question in terms of thinking about some of the challenges that we face in our particular market. There are quite a few industries that deal with regulated data, and while they might not handle protected health information, they certainly are handling what would be considered sensitive information and has the same sort of kind of control requirements and that sort of thing. I think, though, that one of the areas that we tend to not spend a lot of time thinking about in healthcare is the IoT space and the IIoT space. So if you think about some of the lessons that we can learn and share back and forth with manufacturing, for example, that operate a variety of industrial control systems and have to deal with this concept of using lots of devices and having to secure devices and pieces of equipment in the midst of an IT set of services. And I think there's the same sort of situation that we face with biomedical devices inside hospitals and with patients using home-based monitoring systems and that sort of thing. We in some respects have that same sort of challenge associated with IoT and having to ensure that we have properly managed and secured those systems and devices in the midst of all of the other information systems that we're operating. And so I think that, we can learn from some of the challenges and some of the approaches in those industries. But I also think we will be able to offer some guidance as well, cross-pollinating to those. Anything to add, Raj?
Yeah, so financial industry is another regulated industry that we have a lot to learn from. There's a lot of PII data in the financial industry that's well protected. That's a heavy target for attackers, and there's a lot of responsibility that comes with keeping up with the business, keeping the business going in the highly transactional atmosphere that our financial industries operate, while keeping to the regulations, while making sure that the data is kept secure and always available for our business users as well as our end consumers. So there's a lot we have learned from there as well. That's all applicable to healthcare too.
Well, great. We had another question that was related to the megatrends slide that I shared. And it was related to software-defined architectures and infrastructures, and I asked about whether we're seeing some retrenchment back to on-prem and approaches. No, actually, if you look across kind of the megatrends, one of the common characteristics is really one of scale and cost performance. In large measure, the reason why we're seeing things like software-defined infrastructure and automated deployments and the increase in levels of automation is really because it's very costly to not. And that cost is borne in a variety of systems, but it's also really fundamentally labor cost. And it's hard to hire. It's hard to hire the talent that we need to be able to do a tremendous amount of manual work. And so, that's why the movement and really that drive toward things like software-defined networks and the introduction of automation, and really what you saw with kind of the introduction of AI in the security space, kind of goes back to that. How do we remove toil, and how do we improve the performance of talent that we have? And I think that is not only present in kind of what we're doing with AI, but it was really in large measure what is driving those kind of deploying software by code. The side benefit, though, of software by code is that you have something that is declarative, meaning it's described in advance. And so it provides a pattern that we can deploy, and we can inspect that pattern prior to the deployment of that. And so it gives us some confidence that we are, in fact, deploying something that we intended and has the necessary controls that meet the various requirements and security posture that we're trying to manage. And so I don't think we're going to see a movement away from many of those mega trends. I think, in fact, there's increasing pressure in the direction of even more automation. And I think you're going to see increasing amounts of that being helped by the introduction of AI. Anything on that, Raj, that you've observed?
Yeah. So this is just to add to the points that you already made. I think customers are reaping the benefits of going to the cloud by not only scaling up and getting the value around automation, around the software defined architectures at scale, but then also they are deriving the value from that scale, right? So they don't have to pay for keeping up with the large set of on-prem servers. They don't have to think about scaling out ahead of time. The cloud vendors do that for them. And then as the cloud vendors determine what is best, or if there are any updates to the architecture, that's deployed across the board. And that's the value that our vendors get, our customers get across the board in a very rapid, scalable manner. So that's all I had to add.
So we have a question that came in. If we could speak a little bit more about DLP, or data loss prevention, and defining levels of risk across data sets within GCP. I'm going to kick this to you, Raj, to start.
So with DLP, we do have a number of info fields that are already available for customers to identify the sensitive data in their environment. We understand it's hard to narrow down and zoom in into that data that may be present. So our DLP platform can help you identify those fields rapidly across all your data, and therefore identify what those risky fields could be, and then they also provide an attributed value, a confidence measure to those risky data assets. And based on that information, then you can make a decision whether how do you want to classify it. We have ability on our platform to be able to narrow down and provide security at the row level, at the column level in case of structured data. And then we have the ability to also take in the unstructured data and then define row level, column level security on top of that. So that protects the data assets no matter where they are located. And finally, around DLP in general, you can leverage that across all our suites of products across the board. So and the info types that we talked about, there are at least 150 predefined custom predefined templates that are available for customers to use. But then you can also define your own custom DLP fields, so that if you know that you have your own sensitive data in a certain format, or it looks in a certain way, that's something that you can zoom in and you can detect, and you can take next steps on that. So I'm happy to get you more information and walk you through the DLP setup if you'd like, and that's available via office hours.
Yeah, I think DLP is probably one of my favorite services. As a former CISO, sitting in the CISO chair, one of the challenges is always how to identify the assets that you have, and between being able to do cloud asset inventory, and then being able to really understand and discover the data assets that you have, and being able to do some classification and really kind of a survey of what it is that you have, and then is just invaluable. I mean, it makes it so much easier for me to be able to understand who should have access to what. And it really often begins really from that beginning point of understanding the assets you have. And and if you look at something like NIST CSF, that's really what they are kind of one of the key areas of focus in the first pillar of identify. It's really identify the assets that you have. And I think increasingly those assets are data assets, informational assets that we have. And so I love tools that help me figure out what I have and then being able to classify it, characterize it, and then provide treatment to it. So redaction, encryption, tokenization, do whatever. I think it's a really really great tool.
Agree.
So we had another question that said, was asking about, let's see, do we have any are there kind of default security architectures or standards across all the various cloud service providers? And I think really, if you think about all of the cloud service providers, which we're one, and we all share kind of very common perspectives in terms of the way kind of the kind of security practices that we believe are necessary. A lot of those really fundamentally apply to how we manage identity. In a cloud space, really a good identity and access management is critical for those services. And that's both on individual accounts as well as service accounts for services and that sort of thing. And I think, you would look across any cloud service provider and you'd see that, we all kind of look at frameworks like the NIST cybersecurity framework, and we would look at that and say, yes, we agree. There's good kind of prudent guidance in that. And that includes, the CIS benchmarks and OWASP top 10 and a variety of industry best practices. I think, they're all kind of well-established approaches and really give some guidance around how to think about the problem and how to approach it. I think there are some other kind of uniform practices that apply regardless. And that's also kind of core threat modeling. Just having the ability to think about and define a process, to understand the data flows in that process, to understand the trust boundaries, to understand how data moves from one spot to another, and then to be able to kind of look at that and evaluate what could go wrong with it, and then to think carefully about what kind of controls would I put in place to counter those threats. And I think, that's a practice that we all have to do, and it has to apply regardless. And it informs really all of the architectural decisions that you make going forward, because it helps you define really what the business goal is of a particular service, and then to think very carefully about how we're going to preserve and maintain that business objective, and think carefully about the controls. So, I think the short answer is I think there's a lot more consensus than there is difference in terms of approach. Now, do we have different services, and do they have different controls and user interfaces? Sure, they do. But I think broad consensus is there.
I think you covered it there, Bill. Thanks. I don't have anything to add.
I think so. A little related to this, there was a question around how are companies handling security in multi-cloud environments and on-premise compute. And I think generally, the conversations that I have with customers, people have very complicated environments, right? There's not a single server room. There's not a single cloud. There's not a single SaaS service. We have very complicated computing environments generally, and and that poses challenges for management of those environments. I think that kind of the perspective that we take is that we, in some respects, assume that people are going to have those kinds of mixed environments, that they're going to live in on-prem, hybrid, multi-cloud. They're going to have mobile devices and IoT and all of that computing complexity in order to achieve the objectives of the business. And I think it's really that that has made us think quite a bit and built capabilities that span beyond the just GCP or the Google Cloud. If you look at a service that we talked about a little bit today in terms of like Chronicle, for example, it looks and can be applied as as a SIEM solution across a variety of different environments, not just GCP. And I think if you look at even what we're doing in threat intel, we don't just look at the threat intel associated with our platform. We look broadly at threat intel across the industries that we serve, and we do that through our internal threat intel and Mandiant and a variety of others, and we offer those services out regardless of platform. And I think the same holds for incident response planning and recovery. The work that we do there is it's really about how do we get the business back and get it operational again, and that means going where the problem is, wherever that problem is, and helping the customer restore that service. And again, that could involve any number of platforms and services and on-prem compute, et cetera. So I think, that we can't be, we can't really be parochial. We can't just, draw a perimeter around a single platform. I think we really have to think broadly about how we help solve the broad security problems that customers face, regardless of where they compute.
Couldn't have said it better. Thank you, Bill.
I think we had one question here. Let's see. Last question looks like it asked, how siloed do you find security? I think generally, security has to be serving the business. We don't do our work for the sake of simply doing our work. We do it to serve the objectives of the business, and in healthcare, that's serving patients. And that's ensuring that patients are getting safe access and to services that they need that are life-saving. And we need to support the caregivers that are providing those services and the people that are helping pay for those services. That's the business objective. And security works in service to that. And that means, though, that security has to understand the business, and it has to understand how the business operates, and what's the business model, and all of the various challenges associated with delivering care. And it's incumbent upon the security professionals to get close to the business, and to have a seat at the table is hard. But we need to be there, and we need to be there from the perspective of really, perhaps not just purely security, but really about risk management and helping the organization understand the kinds of risks they face with respect to cybersecurity, and how to contextualize and control those risks, and to do it in an appropriate and responsible way. There's also, I think, a challenge for us in the security organization to also further not silo ourselves. And what I mean by that is to, kind of think holistically about the security space, and to look at it and understand that we can't silo out governance, risk, and compliance from security operations, or incident response from privacy management, or physical security from cybersecurity. Because there's an interrelationship across those. And for example, in the GRC space, that's where we're setting policy, and we're looking at compliance obligations, and we're looking at evidence of control, and that has to be carefully managed and orchestrated with people who are actually owning the operational responsibility for implementing those controls. And if you think about in the physical space, a lot of what complements physical security is cyber physical security, and that means things like badge access, cameras, physical monitoring, and digital monitoring of environments. And so, we ourselves have to be ensuring that we're not putting our own internal silos in place in our security organizations. And so, that's work that we have to do and be diligent about.
Right. So security has really come a far way then, Bill, from being kind of being more of like a separate thing of its own versus now being a value add and being a fundamental building block to a lot of organizations. And I think we are still on that journey in order to make sure that the board realizes this, that security is adding that value when it's thought about as a fundamental building block for anything that's constructed around the organization versus being an afterthought.
Yeah, I think that as a CISO, my responsibility is providing some security guidance and risk advice and perspective to the organization, to the board. Not only to operate a security organization, but to really be thinking more broadly about what kind of risks does the business face, and to work closely with the chief risk officer or whoever else I might be in partnership with, and that could be general counsel, et cetera. But really to work with an audit committee of the board and others to really make sure that we're thinking carefully and comprehensively about the risks to the business and doing what we can from a security perspective to help eliminate risk or control risk and be involved in those risk treatment decisions. And then, very often then we go off and implement technical controls and a variety of other controls. But it's really, I look at my role and responsibility is really an advisor to the broader business. Security professionals are kind of trained to think about risk and very often what can go wrong, and to think about, okay, what are we going to do about things when they go wrong, and is there something we can do to prevent it? And so there's kind of a risk mindset in general, and I think that's something that we can offer to the broader business, and not to be a naysayer and to say, no, you can't go do that. It's really to think creatively with our business colleagues to help them come up with a solution that solves the business objective, but does it in a way that protects the patient information and the intellectual property and the assets of the business. And so it's really, I think, security it has to be in partnership. See if we have any other questions. And I don't see any additional questions. Well, I'd just like to say thank you all for tuning in, and thank you to my colleague Raj. And we will be sending out a follow-up email that will include a recording of this, as well as an opportunity to request office hours and to dive deeper into any of the topics and areas that we discussed today. And again, thank you very much on behalf of Google Cloud. Thank you.